I found out my sister was sleeping with my husband 3 days before my wedding anniversary. Not from her, not from him. From a text message that popped up on the shared iPad while I was searching for a lasagna recipe. And what I did next. It took me 11 months to plan, and by the end of it, they both lost everything they thought they'd stolen from me. But let's back up, because you need to understand who I was before all this happened. My name is Rachel. I was 34 years old, married for 7 years to a man named David, and my younger sister Melissa had been living in our guest house for the past 2 years while she was getting back on her feet after her divorce. I welcomed her with open arms. I paid for her car repairs. I co-signed her apartment application that never went through because her credit was so bad she just stayed with us instead. I introduced her to my friends. I included her in everything. Family dinners, vacations, even date nights sometimes, because I felt sorry for her being alone. David and I built our life together from nothing. We started a small consulting business in our spare bedroom. By year 5, we had 12 employees and a real office downtown. I thought we were a team. I thought we told each other everything. I was wrong. It was a Tuesday evening. David was working late, something that had become more frequent over the past few months, though I hadn't thought much of it because business was genuinely booming. I picked up the iPad from the kitchen counter to look up a recipe, and a notification banner slid down from the top of the screen. A text from a contact, saved simply as M. I want you to sit with that for a second, because in the back of my mind, some small voice was already screaming before I even opened it. I opened it. The messages went back 4 months. Hotel confirmations. Photos I won't describe. Plans for a trip to Cabo that David had told me was a guy's fishing trip the following month. And worse, conversations about how they'd figure things out once enough money was moved out of the joint business account. My sister, my own sister, who I had sheltered, fed, and defended to our parents for 2 years, had been sleeping with my husband. And they were planning to drain our business together. I didn't cry. I want to be honest with you, I felt something colder than sadness. I felt like a switch flipped in my brain. Most people, when they find out something like this, confront immediately. I understand that instinct completely. But I've always been someone who thinks 3 steps ahead, and confronting them that night would have accomplished exactly nothing except giving them time to cover their tracks, move money, and prepare a story. So I closed the messaging app. I put the iPad back exactly where I found it. And when David came home at 11:47 p.m. smelling faintly like perfume that wasn't mine, I kissed him on the cheek and asked how his day was. That night, lying next to him, I made a decision. I was not going to be the woman who found out and blew up her own life in a fit of rage, only to watch them land softly somewhere else together. I was going to document everything. I was going to understand exactly how deep this went, and I was going to make sure that when this ended, I walked away with everything, and they walked away with nothing. The next morning, I called a lawyer. Not to file anything yet, just to ask questions. Quiet questions. What happens to a business if one partner can prove infidelity plus financial misconduct? What does commingled assets mean? How do you freeze an account without alerting the other person? I started taking notes like it was my job. Over the next several weeks, I became someone I didn't recognize, calm, methodical, watching everything. I discovered David had opened a separate business account 8 months earlier, when I wasn't listed on, and had been slowly transferring client payments into it instead of our shared operating account. Nearly $180,000 had moved through it. He told our accountant it was for tax planning purposes. Our accountant, who I'd hired, who reported to me just as much as him, had no idea I didn't know about this account. That conversation alone told me everything. I also found out this wasn't new. Melissa and David's relationship, based on messages I quietly screenshotted every time I got access to the iPad, had started nearly a year earlier, right around the time she moved into our guest house. She hadn't been staying with us because she was struggling. She'd been staying with us because she wanted to be close to him. Every girls' night she'd invited me to over the past year, where she'd talk about how hard dating was and how she just wanted what I had. She'd been laughing about me behind my back the entire time. I kept a folder, bank statements, screenshots, photos of receipts I found in David's jacket pockets, emails between him and a divorce attorney he'd already consulted without telling me 3 months prior, where he'd asked what would happen to the business if things ended amicably. He was already planning his exit. He just hadn't planned on me finding out first. Here's where it gets interesting. I didn't just want a divorce settlement. Divorce settlements happen to a lot of people, and honestly, a fair split wasn't going to feel like justice to me. I wanted them to lose the thing they thought they were about to gain, each other, the money, and the life they assumed they'd slide into once I was out of the picture. So I made 3 moves, carefully, over the span of about 6 weeks. First, I quietly met with our business attorney and restructured our LLC's operating agreement, using a legitimate clause about protecting company assets during personal disputes, citing vague concerns about a family member's access to the guest house and property. This gave me grounds to legally remove Melissa's name from a small consulting contract David had apparently set up for her, a fake vendor arrangement where she was being paid $4,000 a month for marketing consulting she never actually did. That ended immediately, and it was completely defensible on paper. Second, I contacted our largest client, a company that made up nearly 40% of our annual revenue, under the pretense of a standard account review. During that call, I casually mentioned we were restructuring ownership percentages internally. This wasn't a lie. It was about to be true. But it planted a seed that made the client's procurement team start asking questions about contract stability, which meant they wanted things in writing, tied specifically to me as the primary account holder, since I was the one who'd built and maintained that relationship for 6 years. David had always been more of a big picture guy. I was the one clients actually trusted. Third, and this was the part that took the most patience, I waited for the Cabo trip. 2 days before they were supposed to leave for their little getaway, I filed for divorce. Quietly. No dramatic announcement. My lawyer served David at his office, in front of his business partner, me, because legally I was still entitled to be there for certain end-of-quarter meetings. I watched his face when the envelope was handed to him. I said nothing. I simply finished my coffee, gathered my laptop, and left. That same afternoon, I sent Melissa a text. Just one line. Have fun in Cabo. I hope it was worth it. She called me 11 times that night. I didn't answer. The following week, everything unraveled quickly. The divorce filing included the financial documentation I'd gathered, the hidden account, the fake consulting contract, the pattern of fund transfers, which meant this wasn't a simple no-fault split anymore. It became a financial misconduct case. Our state's laws allowed for unequal distribution of assets when one party could prove intentional dissipation of marital funds, and I had 11 months of paper trail. David's attorney tried to negotiate quickly and quietly, clearly hoping to avoid this becoming public in a small business community where reputation is everything. But I wasn't in a rush anymore. I'd already waited 11 months. I could wait a little longer. Here's how it ended, roughly 8 months after that Tuesday night with the iPad. I walked away with 68% ownership of the business, the house, and a settlement that accounted for the misappropriated funds, which the court ordered David to repay from his share of remaining assets. Our biggest client, the one I'd quietly reinforced my relationship with, requested that I remain their primary point of contact going forward, which effectively meant David's role in the company became irrelevant even before the paperwork was finalized. He resigned from the business 4 months later because there was, functionally, nothing left for him to do. Melissa's fake consulting arrangement being terminated meant she lost her only reliable income. She and David did end up together, officially, about a year after everything settled. I heard through my mother that things between them didn't last particularly long. Turns out a relationship built on betrayal and financial secrets doesn't have the strongest foundation once the money and the excitement of sneaking around disappears. My parents, for what it's worth, did not take Melissa's side. She had, after all, betrayed both her sister and violated the trust of the family who took her in when she had nowhere else to go. I run the business alone now. It's actually grown since the divorce. Turns out I was doing more of the real work than either of them realized. I don't regret waiting those 11 months. I don't regret being patient, methodical, and quiet while I built my case instead of screaming and breaking things the night I found out. Some people think revenge means yelling, throwing someone's clothes on the lawn, keying a car. Real revenge is calm. It's patient. It's making sure that when the truth comes out, you're the only one left standing on solid ground. If you were in my position, would you have confronted them immediately, or would you have waited like I did? Let me know in the comments, and if you want to hear what happened when Melissa tried to reach out to me 2 years later, let me know, because that's a story on its own.